What's going on, guys? Aero here, and welcome back to another video. Now in today's video, I want to talk to you guys more about Xenoblade Chronicles 3, as this is probably going to be the last video that I'm going to make about this game right before the release of this game, as the game is just hours away from the time that I'm making this. But I really want to talk about this because there's some really cool information that we have about the game from the developers themselves. Now for the past few days, Nintendo has been uploading snippets of an interview that they got to have with Monolithsoft and the development team of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and there's a lot of cool information that you get to learn about kind of their process for making a game like this and kind of their decisions for stuff, and I think it's actually really interesting, especially if you're like me and you really like to kind of see things behind the scenes and learn about why things are the way that they are in the game. So I did find it kind of interesting, and I know that they were kind of releasing new parts every day, so I figured I would wait till the last one came out, which was today, and then compile together pretty much everything from the entire interview and all the big points that I want to talk about. And these are kind of just the main details in my opinion. I really encourage you to actually go and check out the interview if you are interested in this, because there's a lot more details and a lot of cool stuff that's actually in here. So I will have it linked below in the description if you want to go and check it out for yourself. Now real quick before we get started, I just want to let you guys know that I am going to be streaming Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and my first time playthrough of it over on my Twitch, so if you haven't followed me there, definitely go and follow me on twitch.tv/actualaero. I do plan on uploading the VODs from my Twitch streams over on YouTube here as well, so that way I can preserve my first time kind of playthrough. But if you do want to be a part of the live streams themselves and actually kind of talk with me and help out during the streams and stuff too, then definitely go ahead and follow me there. Alright, but moving into the interview here, there's a lot of cool things that I want to talk about, and the first thing that I feel like is really kind of interesting is the fact that Mr. Takahashi himself refers to Xenoblade Chronicles 3 as the culmination of the trilogy. Now, we've been talking about how Xenoblade Chronicles 3 could potentially be like the last game in the series in terms of like the numbered Xenoblade games, and how this one could be wrapping up everything and what they could do after. I even made a video on that, so if you haven't seen that, there should be a little eye up in the corner. You can definitely go ahead and watch that video, but I'll also put it in the outro of this video. But I do find it really interesting how even Mr. Takahashi himself is using the word trilogy to describe this, in the sense that Xenoblade 1, Xenoblade 2, and Xenoblade 3 are part of a trilogy, and that if there is going to be a Xenoblade 4, it probably wouldn't be connected in any way to these games, or it would be like the start of a new saga or something. But they do talk about future Xenoblade games and things like that towards the end of this interview, so we will come back to this. Now, they also mention how all of these games are going to stand alone from each other, but there are going to be elements from Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2, so of course this makes a lot of sense. I mean, every Xenoblade game is like its own story, however there are loose connections and references and things that happen towards the end that do connect the overall games all together, so it makes a lot of sense that that's probably what's going to happen with Xenoblade 3 as well. Now, Mr. Takahashi also talked about how he goes about making Xenoblade villains, and how he likes to have villains with their own principles of justice so that you can partly sympathize with them as well, and I feel like this is definitely visible inside of Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2. All of like the main villain characters, or just the big villains that are in there, they all kind of have their own reasonings for the way that they act, like Egil inside of Xenoblade 1 and kind of the stuff that he went through with his friend Arglist and all of that. Malthus inside of Xenoblade 2 and kind of seeing what happened to his mother, Jin of course and seeing what happened to his driver Laura and everything like that. You can really kind of understand why these villains, even though they are bad guys, why they are the way that they are, and I really do like that about the Xenoblade games. I feel like it makes the villains very special, and it's not just like somebody who's evil for the sake of being evil, but you can kind of understand their side as well. Now, Kojima even mentions here that when Takahashi first came up to him with the base idea for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it didn't even feel like a Xenoblade game to him, and that it felt like Takahashi was removing the Xenobladeness that they had from Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2, but through trial and error, they were still able to achieve it. So I do find it kind of crazy how this game was so different that they didn't even feel like it was a Xenoblade game, but they were still able to kind of keep it like that in the end. Now, of course, one of the biggest things about this game is how characters only live for 10 years, and Takahashi explained how humans live for about 70 to 80 years, but how would the perception of life change if you were only able to live for 10 years? And I do feel like this is going to be a very important theme throughout this game, and it's just going to be kind of really crazy to see how these characters have to live through that, knowing that they really don't have that much time left. Now, Takahashi also mentioned an interesting analogy where he says here that the first Xenoblade game is more of like a straight A student, and then Xenoblade 2 isn't really a straight A student, but for the third title, they wanted to stop being a goody two-shoes. Now, I don't know exactly what he means by this analogy, and I do feel like you can kind of take it in many different ways, but to me, in my opinion, it kind of felt like he was saying that Xenoblade 1 is kind of a more straightforward, standard type of game, but Xenoblade 2 was a little bit more unconventional and definitely did some things off the rails a little bit, but with this game, they just wanted to kind of go unhinged and go all out and do something completely different. Now, they also talked a little bit about the protagonist Noah and how Noah is going to be more of a philosophical type of character with his own beliefs and view of the world and is always going to be thinking very critically. And that does make me very excited because I really do love protagonists like that who are always thinking very deeply and asking like really kind of crazy questions and kind of trying to uncover everything. I feel like those types of protagonists you can really kind of get attached to and relate to them much more. So for me, I'm going to be very excited to kind of see how Noah is going to be throughout the game and if he can beat out Shulk for being my favorite Xenoblade protagonist. They also mentioned how they tried really hard to make sure that the dialogue is balanced between all the characters. Of course, Noah and Mio have the protagonist role, so they do get a little bit more attention, but they did mention how like they tried to make sure that Uni, Taion, Lan, Senna, pretty much everybody has a lot of kind of moments throughout the game, and it doesn't really feel like that certain characters get way more than others. Now, in terms of having 6 main characters throughout the game, they did talk about how they felt that 6 was a really good balance between too few and too many characters, where if they only had like 3 or 4, it would have felt too few, but then having like 8 or 9 characters would have been too many, and especially because of how they wanted all the characters to be a part of the combat and the gameplay itself, bringing like 8 or 9 characters into combat would have probably made the Switch explode, to be honest, and the UI probably would have been really cluttered too. Now, they also talked about designing the characters, where Saito-san, who was the character designer of Xenoblade 2, is also returning for this game, but he designed the characters to look much more mature and taller, as this is a more serious story, and even the costumes are not too flashy to match the tone of it, and I think that this is actually really good. Personally, I definitely prefer these types of character designs. Some of the ones in Xenoblade 2 were definitely a little over the top in my opinion, and of course, if you do want kind of like the more revealing types of clothing, I'm sure there's going to be options for those, and there's going to be swimsuits for like Uni and everybody that they're probably going to add through DLC, or maybe you can just buy them at a shop or something. So I think having them be optional choices like that, like also what they did in Xenoblade 1, is definitely the way to go about it. They also talk about how designing Noah in particular was really hard for them. It looks like it mentions here that it was a very hellish process of trial and error, where basically Saito-san would draw up a whole bunch of different options, and Takahashi would just look at them and be like, nope, this doesn't really look like a Noah, and then ask him to restart. Now, in terms of transitioning the artwork into 3D, they talk about how they used many special shaders and techniques that were used to make sure that the 3D computer graphics also closely resemble Saito's art style, so I do think that it's very cool because of how the game, even with the 3D models, looks like the original art style that he drew it in. Now, of course, one of the biggest themes about this game are the flutes that Noah and Mio play, and it was actually mentioned here how it was Mr. Mitsuda who's kind of handling a lot of the music for these Xenoblade games. It was him when he was talking with Takahashi where they decided on using the flute, where basically they wanted to use an instrument to kind of have like the main theme of the game, and he was talking about the 3 musical families of percussion, string, and wind. And it was from that they decided to use the flutes as like the main theme for this game. It is kind of interesting because if they pick something else, like we could have had like a whole guitar theme or something, but I guess it makes a lot of sense with the flutes because if Noah and Mio just pulled out a guitar out of nowhere, it wouldn't have really made a lot of sense, or some other type of instrument. So I do think that the flutes make a lot of sense and really kind of fits the world perfectly. Now, the coolest thing about the flutes, and by far the most interesting thing that I found in this interview, is that Monolithsoft actually made their own flutes just to get a special sound to be able to use inside of the soundtrack for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and it was actually Mr. Mitsuda who suggested this, where if they made their own flutes with their own different holes that they drill in, they can achieve a sound that has never been heard before. And we even have images of these flutes here that you can see that they've been decorated to resemble the flutes that Noah and Mio use inside of the game, and I think it's just really cool to see. Honestly, I know that these are like the actual real flutes that they use, so of course that's actually really expensive, but even if we got like a little small plastic model of these types of flutes in terms of the special edition, I think it would have been so cool because I would love to have these as a collector and just kind of hang them somewhere in my room or something because they look really pretty. And you can even listen to this and see how amazing they actually sound. And so in terms of the soundtrack and also including all the little jingles, there's about 140 musical tracks that are inside of this game. And it's funny because Takahashi still wanted to add at least 15 more. I guess he just wants to keep adding more and more to his games. Now, the next couple of things are about the development style of Xenoblade, and they talk about how one of the challenges for them with this game was making these seamless transitions when you go from a cutscene into the gameplay, where if you guys didn't know, inside of this game, there's actually not a loading screen whenever you see like a really awesome cutscene and then go right into a boss battle or a fight, where instead, you're just going to see like the screen move and all of a sudden you're going to be right in the gameplay. It's actually really, really cool because it's kind of insane how they managed to do this on a Nintendo Switch. Like I've seen a game like Final Fantasy VII Remake do this, but of course, a PlayStation 4 and a PlayStation 5 are much more powerful than a little Nintendo Switch. So the fact that somehow Monolith got this working on a Switch is just really kind of insane to see. Now, in terms of the world design, they also mathematically calculated how big the world is, and they found out that this game actually has a world that is 5 times bigger than the one inside of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I find that kind of mind-blowing because Xenoblade 2 has a pretty big world, especially if you combine all of the Titans together. Like if you combine, all of Gormott, all of Mor Ardain, all of Leftheria, all of Tantal, like it's a pretty big world to combine all of those different types of areas together, and you're saying that this game is not even double or triple or quadruple, but 5 times larger than the entirety of Xenoblade 2's world. It's gonna take so long to explore everything and find all the secret areas and the chests and everything, and I can't wait because I really love exploring Xenoblade's worlds. And then Takahashi even mentions how Xenoblade 3 really kind of does represent everything that they have done so far and is filled with the answers to all of our questions, and there are a variety of new challenges as well. Now, they also touched a little bit on the expansion pass, where they did say here that the expansion pass story is going to be similar to Torna the Golden Country, with a high volume of content that will not let you down. So yeah, there you go. That is confirmation that it is basically going to be Torna 2, and especially if they've kind of learned their lesson about not having the forced side quest inside of this, if they really just do like an entirety main story that's going to be even longer than Torna without the side quests and stuff, we could be potentially getting like a 30 to 40 hour just main story as part of this DLC, and that makes me very excited because of course just looking at this DLC artwork with the Monado and the Aegis sword and Noah's sword, like you can't tell me that this DLC isn't going to be hype with something like this. And finally, the last thing that I want to talk about is in addition to the very first thing that Takahashi mentioned about how Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is kind of the culmination to the trilogy, they also did ask if the Xenoblade Chronicles series is still going to go on, and they said yes, of course it will. The Xenoblade Chronicles series will still go on for as long as possible. Now, some people are saying that this kind of confirms the Xenoblade Chronicles 4. I don't think that that's the case. I really don't know what they're going to do with like the numbered Xenoblade games. But of course, the entire Xenoblade series also includes Xenoblade X, and they did mention that they wanted to make Xenoblade Chronicles X2 as well. They said that at the same time they also wanted to make a Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and of course one of those did happen, so I definitely do think that they're going to be focusing on Xenoblade X, and there's definitely a lot of stuff that can still be done with that game. But yeah, there you go guys, that is pretty much all the biggest information about Xenoblade 3 from this Monolithsoft interview. Of course, like I said, I didn't cover everything, and the interview does go much more in depth, so if you do find this stuff really interesting, then definitely be sure to click the link below in the description and go check it out for yourself. But if you enjoyed this video, then definitely be sure to click that like button and also comment down below and let me know what you guys think about all of this. What did you guys find the most interesting from this interview? Definitely be sure to comment down below and let me know. If you're new to this channel, then please be sure to subscribe. I'm definitely going to have some more Xenoblade content in the future, so definitely be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Click on that bell to become a part of the notification squad. Go follow me on Twitter at Aero so you can be featured in videos, and also join my Discord server as well. We've got a bunch of people in there who are always talking about Pokemon and Smash Bros. And Nintendo, so definitely be sure to join that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching.